Hello, my friends. This is Andy. Hey, I wanted to come on, not on one of my business pages, but on my personal page to talk about something that I've been dealing with over the last couple of days. And dealing with, I think that's a really bad way to put that, but it's in discussions with people about, what's been going on with General Flynn, and then, of course, the stuff that's going on with Biden and Kavanaugh. And this comes up in either casual conversations or in comments to posts and that kind of thing. And I think my reason for coming on is that I'm slightly concerned that there are people that really don't understand why this is a problem, any one of these things. and I've tried to explain this, but of course people are so, it always goes back to President Trump, right? Everything that you say, whether it has to do with Flynn or Kavanaugh or, victims of domestic violence, victims of sexual assaults, rape victims, it always comes, somehow always comes back to Trump. And it causes this, this blindness and this defensiveness that, that it's okay. It's okay to do some of these things. And I want to point out, and I'm going to bring up General Flynn first, because I think it's important that we understand why this is not acceptable in our world of living here in the United States. You can, if you want to live in a country that's communist and has these beliefs and things that no matter what you are guilty before there is even a crime, then you probably should go live in that country. But that's not how it works here in the United States. Just to give you a little bit of background, those of you that may be watching that don't know my entire history, I'm a former police officer with the city of Anaheim. I was there for 21 years. I was a detective in the family crimes unit and sex crimes unit. And I was in the canine unit. I was on SWAT and did a couple of other things, sometimes a few undercover things, but not on a permanent basis, but on a temporary basis. And then since then, I've gone on and have become an expert an expert in courts, where I give my expert testimony on misdoings, quite possibly, of law enforcement. I investigate, criminal cases to make sure that things were done correctly. And I've been doing that for the last 10 to 15 years and have testified in, it's got to be somewhere in the 100 times in federal court. I think I may have testified more than most people on the planet in federal court and in, state court. And so, as an expert, right, I get a case, which can be a stack of papers. I go through the papers. I watch video. I listen to audio recordings. I look at pictures. I look at evidence, and then I make determinations on how the investigation was run. And if there's any problems, quite often they'll call me in to testify. I either give a deposition or I'm actually on the stand sworn in during a suppression hearing. And then I'm questioned by both the prosecution and the defense. And quite often I'm attacked personally. And it can get pretty bad. I can be on the stand for 2 days straight, and I will be attacked personally. They'll investigate me. And I'm not the arresting officer, nor am I the suspect, but yet I become the focus on these things. So I lay that foundation so you have a place of understanding of where I'm coming from, that I'm not just a defensive, person of either one of the parties. And it's odd that you can have people that are on an opposing party, as I am, think that I'm attacking them. All right, I place, and again, I want to lay this other bit of foundation, is that I don't look at Democrats or Republicans the same in regard to voters as I do to the leadership, senators, Congress people, president, vice president, all the other positions, governors, all that kind of stuff. That's if I call anybody a dimwit, it's them. I'm generally not calling a voter a dimwit, because unfortunately their information that they tend to focus on is only from that side, right? And so they only have the information that they're getting, and as far as they know, what they're being told is true, when in fact in some cases it may not. And this goes on both sides, Republican or Democrat. So if I'm talking about a voter, I'm usually not derogatory. Usually not, but if I'm derogatory, it's to the craziness of the media right? There's some lunatics in media, and there's some lunatics that are in power, and we need to understand that. So let me just go, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. I'm going to talk about the Federal Bureau of Investigation, at which I have worked with in regard to bank robberies and some other investigations, especially when it comes to child abuse and kidnappings and that kind of stuff. And I'm I've been friends with some. I played hockey with some of them. I played against them in hockey, and so I've known them. But you have no difference between, now people can seemingly think that the Federal Bureau of Investigation is somehow different than a law enforcement agency on a police level or sheriff level or even a state police and that kind of stuff, but it's all the same. Where we start with our investigations is with a crime, right? There has to be a crime, right? It doesn't matter. Now you can have the DEA who surveils and develops information, and they're information gatherers. That's their job. But they also investigate and that kind of stuff. And then you have the CIA, right? The CIA is information gatherers and that kind of stuff. And they want to be ahead of a crime, but they can't necessarily invent a crime or go after somebody and then necessarily cause them to commit a crime. That is not really the way it's supposed to work. So the FBI is a crime investigation bureau, So you have to start with a crime. Right? You have a crime, and then you have an investigation, you gather evidence, you find your suspect, and that's not always in this order. And then you interview or interrogate, and then you arrest. If you have enough information, you take to the attorneys, right? The U.S. attorney, the state attorney, the city attorney. You take your case from the crime that occurred, your investigation, the evidence, the suspect, the interview, and you go to your attorney of whatever level that you're going to, and you say, this is all the information I have. What do you think? Can we prosecute? And then based on all that information, they say, not enough. Go back and get more evidence. Go back and find another witness. Go back and re-interview and see if you can get a statement. And it never should go like this, right? Where you have a citizen who's hated by somebody in power, right? And then you investigate. And you go, oh man, I investigated all kinds of stuff to find out if he's ever committed a crime or that there's something that we can look at. We didn't find anything. So what we're going to do is we're going to surveil him, which they did in the case of General Flynn. And then we're going to spy on him and wait for him to do something so that we can then create a crime. Or then we can coerce him into saying something where he commits a crime. We're going to cause him to commit a crime. And then we have a crime, and then we have a suspect, right? That's not the way it's supposed to work. But when you look at these documents, and I'm going to kind of share some of these documents, and I'm not going to go into all the details because there's way more than this that I have available to go into. But let's, there's some definitions here. Crossfire razor. That's the sense that they thought that he may be involved with Russia collusion and that kind of stuff. And of course, this all goes back to President Trump too, and all that kind of stuff. But they're trying to say that somehow he is working with the Russian government and that kind of stuff. So that's Crossfire Hurricane. I'm sorry. And then you have Crossfire Razor, which is General Flynn. And then right down here. And I have to go back back all the way in 2015. I'm going to come back to my screen here. Back all the way. They were all, oops, didn't mean to do that. Here we go. All the way back in 2015, as they were already trying to get him to find something to either have him fired or arrested. And they've been investigating and spying on General Flynn for a very long time. This is based on documents that have become available. And that's all fine and dandy, I guess. I mean, if you want to make sure that everybody that's in a certain position of power, as an intelligence officer, you want to make sure that he's not doing something he's not supposed to, which is perfectly fine. If somebody says, "Hey, I think that General Flynn or Fred Smith is, he's in this position of intelligence power, but he may be doing something as a spy." So you got to look at it, right? You have to surveil him and see, and then you find out nothing's happening, which, on some level is okay. And you got to say that that's acceptable. We want people to be held accountable, and we want to make sure that they're not doing the wrong thing. But let's say you've done that for 2 or 3 years, right? And you've never been able to find this guy doing anything that you can arrest him for or doing anything wrong. And it's just like, you go, okay, we've done this for years, right? We've spied on him and we've tried. As a matter of fact, they sent a Russian operative to try to get him to do something. He didn't bite on that either. He's a good guy, right? He loves the United States of America. But let's see, which page am I on here? I got to look really quick. Yeah. So right here, it says at some point, analysis was conducted of known CR travel, which is Flynn. This analysis utilized records as well as initiated surveillance on a certain Russian subject. And then it's redacted to determine if there was contact between him and Crossfire Razor. No contact between the two individuals was observed by the surveillance teams covering the event. All right, so they tried. They tried to get him to hang himself and do something, but he didn't do it. And so as we move forward in this document, and I see these redacted documents all the time, especially when I have federal court cases that I'm involved in, and it's not unusual. So it's just one of those things that you have to kind of get used to. But I look at them constantly. But either way, it says the team determined that Crossfire Razor was no longer a viable candidate as part of the larger Crossfire Hurricane umbrella case. A review of logical blank databases did not yield any information on which to predicate further investigation efforts, while a CHS provided, which is a confidential human source, provided some information on CR's interaction with blank. And so the absence of derogatory information, a limited investigation value of the information, the writer notes that this, since Crossfire Razor was not specifically named as an agent of a foreign power by the original, person. All right. So then they're going to close the investigation. Back here in the last paragraph, the FBI is closing this investigation if new information is identified or reported to the FBI regarding activities of Crossfire Razor. The FBI will consider reopening the investigation. This is on January. Oops, sorry. I didn't mean to go that fast. This is on January 4th, 2017. All right. So, oops. Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't showing you the screen, but that's okay. It was probably hard to see anyway. And so coming back here, I'm so sorry. I was looking down, but in the end, they spent a lot of time trying to find him that he was doing something wrong, that he was some type of operative, and that, they tried to even set him up, and he didn't. He goes, I'm an American and I'm not going to do whatever it was, right? Again, there's greater details. I'm just kind of shortening things up for you. And then they said, the FBI, we really tried because there was somebody at the top, which we're going to find out in 1 second, that really wanted General Flynn to go down. They wanted him fired. They wanted him in jail. They wanted to do something with him because they didn't like what he had as far as information in regards to Iran and Afghanistan and some things that were going on. The previous administration simply did not want him to be a part of the new administration, which was, of course, the Trump administration. And so the lower echelon of the FBI had done everything they could and said, the guy's clean. There's nothing we can do. We tried all that there is to do. And then I bring you this bit of information, which is the stuff that's really starting to come out here. And that is a combination of text messages and handwritten notes. And right here, and it's going to be hard for you to say if you're watching this on a phone, but these are text messages going between investigator Strzok, and our FBI Strzok, and Page, who is the U.S. attorney, that they happen to also have some type of thing going on, I guess. But he's saying, hey, if you haven't closed the case yet, which is the Razor case, right? Hurricane Razor. He's wanting it back open. And so the black redacted part is the name of the investigator who's responsible for closing the case. Right. You can see, again, this is on January 4th at 2 p.m. And he says, we need to open it back up or not close it because right down here, where does it say? So need to decide what to do with him. The seventh floor is involved. The seventh floor is involved. That's important, because the seventh floor is where Comey, the FBI director, is, and the vice director. I forget what they call him, but the second guy in charge. Seventh floor. So the FBI director, who later on claimed that I don't know, I sent these people in there to interrogate General Flynn at the White House, and I ignored all the normal protocols, and I wanted them to go in there and question him and see if they could get him to lie. But Comey, later, says, no big deal. But right there in the text messages, it says that although the FBI investigators involved in the case, right, the people that were really in charge of investigating and surveilling and spying on Flynn all said, there's no crime, right? There's no crime. And they were going to close the case. And this is the part where I don't understand that we have people that are in the Democratic side of things that I'm having these conversations with. Oh no, we lie to people all the time and tell them we lie. As far as investigations are concerned, we lie to people all the time. Now, really quick, you may be commenting, but for whatever reason today, comments aren't showing up. So if you have any comments or questions, or you want to put me down or say that I'm crazy, I'm not ignoring them, but I don't see them because for whatever reason, Facebook is having problems with comments. So I don't see those coming in right now. But back to my point. So they're going to close the case, but now you have the upper echelon, right? The seventh floor, the director and the co-director, and their lackey, which is so happens to be Struck, and Page, who say, hold on. The people in charge are not happy that you weren't able to find something, so we're going to make something up. We're going to get him, essentially is what it says in a later text, or actually handwritten notes. Where are they? I had them somewhere. Man, I didn't bring them up. Anyway, I know where they're at. Sorry, just one second. Nope, they're not there either. Where did I put those? Here they are. And so, it's going to be impossible for you to see, but I'm just going to show you that I have them. And those are the handwritten notes that say, what do you want to do? Do you want to try to get him to lie? Do you want to try to get him to say something so that we can fire him? What can we do? Because we don't want him there any longer. We need to do something. So don't close it yet. We're going to try to get him to do something to create a crime, right? This is what we are going to do. We're going to try to get him to create a crime. Why is that wrong, right? You have people that are the Democrats that are saying we do that all the time. We lie. So is it okay to lie? Now, let me go back to my history as a sex crimes detective, family crimes detective, and that kind of stuff. If there's a crime, right, there already has to be a crime. And we've done an investigation, we have evidence, and we have a suspect that we've kind of settled in on, and we have the investigation and evidence, but maybe we just don't have enough. Right? We may still need some type of confession. We have things that are pointing at this person. So you can have things like, so you have a rape, for instance. So we have a rape. In the area of the rape, we've identified 4 guys that we know that are out on parole or probation that are rapists. We've kind of identified one guy who, for whatever reason, we can't figure out where he was on the night of the rape, but his car was parked somewhere in the vicinity of the rape. How do we know that? Well, we have a parking ticket that was issued, that car that was parked illegally across from the apartment where the rape took place, right? Does that mean he raped her? No, but he doesn't live there, right? He lives in Riverside, but his car was parked in Anaheim across from where this rape occurred, right? So we have that. This guy, again, is an ex-felon. His prior history is a rapist, and he was in jail for being a rapist. And so this guy who was a prior rapist, his car is parked. He lives in Riverside, but it's parked in Anaheim. It's been written a parking ticket on the night that the rape took place, during the time that the rape took place. But that still doesn't put him inside the apartment or wherever it took place. There's not enough information. So can we lie at that point? Yes, I've done it. I've done it. I've lied and said, listen, in my interrogation of the suspect during this phase of the interview and interrogation, and say, hey, Fred, I just want you to know that here on this piece of paper right here, in this piece of paper, I have the report from your DNA, and it just so happens your DNA was found in the apartment of the victim. And as far as we know, based on what you're saying and based on what she's saying, you two don't know each other. How did your DNA get inside that apartment? Now, on this paper, there is no DNA report. And again, this is a real case that I was involved in, right? We don't have, we don't really have it, but I'm telling him we do, right? In this piece of paper right here, it says that DNA Fred was found in the bedroom on the sheets of the victim where the rape took place. And now the suspect goes, I didn't, he's thinking, shoot, how did that happen? I had gloves on, I had a condom, I had whatever, right? Dang it. All right. blah. He spits it out. I was there. Whatever. I broke in through the window. I did this thing. And so then you have him talk through what happened, right? So it's still, even though you lied to get the information, I'm going to tell you right now that just because he said he did it doesn't necessarily mean you can still take it to the DA and say, all right, he confessed after I lied. Well, what were you able to determine based on him now confessing that corroborates his confession? And then I will say, well, he said that he went through the window, and yes, we have a broken window, and he used a screwdriver. Inside, we found a screwdriver. When I asked him to describe the screwdriver, he said the screwdriver had a red handle and was an old beat up one that I used for working on cars. When you see the red handle a screwdriver, he's telling you things that only the suspect could know, right? It's not just that he said it was him. That's not good enough. Based on what he said, now you have the evidence that you found that you couldn't pin on him because maybe he wore gloves and didn't have fingerprints. You have the entry point of the window and you have no evidence of, his skin, scraping on the windowsill as he was climbing through. You don't have hair follicles that fell. You have nothing, but you know that the window was broken into because you can see that the screen was cut. And you can see the screwdriver just on the inside of the window, on the ground, that kind of stuff. And so based on what he said, now you're able to match the evidence. You see what I'm saying? So when I have these discussions with people and say, well, law enforcement can lie. Yes, we can lie. But that is, again, that we have a crime, that we have investigation evidence and a suspect. And then based on that lie, we're able to go back up the chain, back to the crime again. All right. Does that make sense? You cannot lie to somebody to get them that they admitted, to get them to create a crime. So let's go back over here. I'm going to go back here where we have a citizen that's hated by somebody, somebody in the administration, somebody that's in the FBI or something like that. This could happen with chief of police. This could happen with a sergeant, a lieutenant, that, this person, doesn't like you because they know that you're dirty or they know something about you, but they just can't find anything. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. You can't go and say, hey, I want you to arrest I already used Fred. Let's go with Jonathan. I want you to go arrest Jonathan. And as a patrol officer, you go, well, what did he do? I don't know, but we're gonna find something. I don't like him. I know that he's a former Hell's Angel. I know that in his past as a kid, he was a dick, and I went to school with him, and I didn't like him. He dated my girlfriend, right? Whatever reason, you can't say, hey, go get this guy, and then we're going to try to figure it out after we arrest him. Well, what's the crime? Well, there is no crime. All right. What's worse is that if it's an FBI, there's a crime to lying to an FBI agent. And so let's say that the same situation, and there's a bank in the city where this guy lives, and it was not robbed. But over a surveillance camera, you can see that Jonathan had entered the bank at 1 o'clock, right? You can see that he entered because there's a timestamp, and he entered at 1 o'clock. When he made a deposit, it says on the thing that it was 1 o'clock. And then again, the bank's not robbed. It has not been robbed. But now you bring him in to investigate him, and you say, hey, where were you today? I don't know. I went to the Albertsons. Did you go to the bank? All right, this is like 3 days later, and you go, no, I don't think so. I didn't go to the bank. Now, Jonathan forgot that he went to the bank. He's not actually lying. He just doesn't remember that he went to the bank. And now the FBI begins to put pressure and says, oh, yeah, you weren't at the bank. You weren't at the bank at Harbor and Ball. No, really? Is that your testimony? It's illegal to lie to the FBI because you have to say that, right? And he'll go, oh, of course. I wasn't at the bank. I don't know what you're saying. I'll place you under arrest for lying to an FBI agent because you are the bank. We have a surveillance tape that shows you in the bank at 1 or 2 o'clock and you made a deposit. Oh, frick, I forgot, right? You can ask me what I did yesterday, and I'm telling you, not because I'm, older than some people that are probably watching. It's just because that's always been the way. How many times have you forgotten what you had for dinner the day before? How many times have you forgotten that you'd had a conversation with somebody? It happens all the time, but you can't do that. This is what they did to General Flynn. Right? They asked about a conversation he had with somebody in the Russian consulate and said, did you have this conversation? He goes, I don't think so. I don't remember. Because when he had that conversation, he was on vacation in the Dominican Republic when he had this conversation. And there's a chance, I'm not saying that he was drinking or anything like that, but how many times have you been on vacation, had a conversation, and then 3 weeks later, a year later, you're asked about it? How many times could you remember what was all involved in that conversation? So they went there to the White House to interview him, to get him to say something where they could arrest him for. He didn't purposely lie. He just said, I couldn't remember, and said, I don't think that I said that. And they said, oh, you're lying to us. And what they had was a transcript of that conversation and said they lied to the FBI, and now you're going to jail. And they ruined his life. All right. So should we be afraid of something like that happen to us? I say yes. Yes, because that happened to anybody. That can happen to any one of us if, whatever reason, we get into a position where we may be threatening to somebody and all this begins to come down. All right. So again, there's a lot more detail, but that's essentially what happened. I'm not making anything up. I'm not, reducing all that happened to in order to make a point. I'm telling you, they investigated him at least for 2 years for a bunch of other stuff, and then tried to get him to make mistakes and to do stuff, and he didn't bite because he's a upstanding U.S. citizen. 30 years as a war hero, and somebody that should never have had their life destroyed. They destroyed his life. They bankrupted him. He's lost everything. They threatened with, prosecuting his son. And out of the goodness of being a good father and wanting to protect his family and son, he knowing the power of the U.S. government, he said, I don't want that to happen to my son, so I will plead guilty if you just leave my son alone. That's how good a guy this is, right? He didn't do anything wrong and couldn't remember a conversation, and so this is what happened. This really is what I found. It. I got more documents. I've read through them just like I would any other case, and again, I can go into more detail, but I'm going to kind of leave it at that point. So what does it have to do with Kavanaugh? So I bring up Kavanaugh too, and here is the problem with Kavanaugh. It's not anything that this Blasey Ford lady was not a victim of some sexual assault, because it's possible. I don't know. The problem is that there's no evidence. There's anti-evidence, as Dan Bongiorno says on his article that I read a couple days ago, is that there was anti-evidence that it was Kavanaugh. It's not that she wasn't sexually assaulted, because there's a good chance that actually happened. But was it Kavanaugh? Everything says, based on the evidence, that it wasn't Kavanaugh, that it couldn't be. There was no corroborating information from anyone, including her best friend, that said that it was him. And that's a problem, right? That is a problem in a case, in a criminal case. You have none of this. None of this. However, the media, right? The media and the Democratic Party was calling him a rapist. They called him a sexual predator. They said that he was a liar, that the victim must be believed, and he is lying. No matter what, she needs to be believed, that she knows it was him, even though there was no other evidence that there was. The problem with that is, again, that can happen to any one of us. We cannot allow this kind of thing to happen. There is no worse stigma. There's no worse name you can put on somebody other than a child molester, a rapist, right? A sexual predator, right? They are saying they're convicting him, right? They're all the way past all this, and they're convicting him of a crime that has no evidence, that has no eyewitnesses, that has no corroborating proof that he was even at the party that she was at when it happened. Right? You have a lot of other statements from other people that said he wasn't even there, right? But instead, what they did is they used words in the media and in the hearings that just labeled him these things, right? So one day I wrote something on Facebook about, Kavanaugh was very passionate and say, listen, and I said something in the positive for Kavanaugh. I was now laid out. I was now a supporter of a sexual predator. This really happened, right? There's been other cases where I've been called a Nazi. There's been other cases where I've been called other stuff, and I've been called these names. These are nasty, horrible names, because I look at how can you call somebody a sexual predator when there's no evidence that he's a sexual predator? There's nothing in his history that he's a sexual predator. The only thing in his history is that he's a good guy, right? And then you have the opposite part with what's happening with Biden. Again, don't know. So Kavanaugh was supposedly in college, right? I think he was in college, high school, college, somewhere in that age group, right? Where a lot of stuff had a lot of drinking. They called him a drunk, right? All of us, not all of us, a lot of us drank in high school. Doesn't make you a drunk, but they were calling him a drunk. This took place when he was in high school. He's now a Supreme Court, at least he was a nominee at the time. He had a whole lot of life that he lived and showed what kind of person he is. But now he's a drunk because he drank in high school and got drunk in high school. Now he's a sexual predator because somebody who doesn't remember any other detail, even when it happened, is calling him a sexual predator and a rapist. But then you have Biden, who is a senator when this incident took place. He's supposed to be, at the time, he was a senator when he sexually accused of attacking, forgot her name, that the lady who's claiming. The thing is, they have the mother who was told, according to the story, by her daughter, the victim, that this happened, and she didn't know what to do, and tried to go to a couple sources, and they told her that there was nothing they could do for her. She then calls Larry King on his show and says, "Hey, my daughter, works for this guy, and this happened." So you have a little bit of evidence, right? You have a little bit of something, right? It's not pure evidence. It's hearsay evidence. It's which, again, in another case, they said hearsay is perfectly fine. It's not. All right, but it's a start. It's something that gets you to the next thing, right? Hearsay evidence is enough to convict somebody. Circumstantial evidence should not necessarily be enough to convict anybody of anything, but it's still evidence. There's something there that may lead you to hard, solid evidence. All right, but it's more we had for Biden than they had for Kavanaugh, right? Still a little bit more. Then you have a neighbor who lived across the street or next door to the victim at the time, and she remembers the victim coming to her and saying, "Hey, this thing happened, and I want to tell somebody about it." These aren't the exact words, but now the neighbor corroborates the fact that when it happened, the victim said, "Hey, Joe Biden did this thing to me," right? So you, again, have more, although hearsay evidence, although not direct evidence, it's still, again, more than we had. But instead, what the media chooses to do, because they don't hate Biden, they love him, they go, we believe Biden. No big deal. What about that Me Too thing? No, the Me Too only counts with Kavanaugh. It doesn't count with Biden, even though with Kavanaugh, we had nothing. And with Biden, we have a couple statements. And I think there might be one other thing. I forget what it is. But you see the problem. Why should we be worried? We should be worried as citizens, not as Democrat or Republican or independent. We should be worried that this kind of thing is taking place. I'm not putting down a victim of sexual abuse. I'm not putting down the fact that it may have happened. It's just they could have remembered it wrong, or they could have gotten it right. Listen, I've dealt with a lot of victims of sexual assault, from children as small as 6 months old to, of course, clearly adults. I dealt with victims who were initially victims, and then we learned that they lied. They then became a suspect in a false police report, which we would convict them for doing that. Sometimes, not always. And so you got to understand that victims also lie from time to time. I'm not saying the victims in these cases lied. I'm just telling you victims lie. And as an investigator, as a detective, we have to be aware and not fully jump in without making sure that we vet even the victim's statements, because they don't remember things exactly the way that they actually happen. Sometimes they lie. And in the cases of the victims that lied, one of them was a wife who got caught by her husband cheating on her husband, and she lied about the sexual activity between her and her boyfriend, and then claimed that the boyfriend is now a rapist. And initially we did arrest him, but then through further investigation, we found out the victim was lying, that they had an affair for a very long period of time, and she simply got caught. Same thing with a 14-year-old girl. Same thing. She got caught by her father and said that the boy raped her, when in fact it was consensual and they were the same age. It wasn't like a 19-year-old with a 14-year-old, which we often convicted. And so understand that these things have a little bit of their own world to each one of them, and you have to kind of weigh them out. So we just need to be worried that things are happening backwards. And I hope that I presented this properly. It's just, I think what happened over the last several days, and I try to not put too much out unless I have really good, solid information. But these are the times where I was dementia Joe. All right. And so it's just frustrating, I think. The frustration is that you have certain people that say, "Oh, it's perfectly fine what the FBI did." And these are people that are not in public office. They're voters. They're citizens of the United States. And as a citizen of the United States, you should be appalled, whether you're Democrat, Independent, or Republican, that Flynn was falsely accused. He was coerced into doing something that he didn't do. Right? He didn't purposefully lie to the FBI, but they created the crime in order to take him out, so that he didn't reveal his side of things. He could be wrong. right? Flynn could actually be wrong in his assessment of Iran and Afghanistan and some of the things that took place. He could be wrong. But the fact is, you can't, as either, the FBI, director, or even the president, which was Barack Obama at the time, can't then say, I need you to take this guy out and have that happen. It cannot happen. This is what appears to have happened in this case with Flynn. With Kavanaugh, it was simply that they hated President Trump. They didn't want his nominee to get onto the Supreme Court. And at every cost, it didn't matter who got in the way, whose life that they ruined, but they just simply didn't want to give Trump a win. And so because they hate Trump so much, they attack Kavanaugh, who, by as far as we can tell, is an upstanding citizen who's done a fairly good job. Now, as a Supreme Court, he's kind of not always sided with Republicans. As a matter of fact, the Democrats should be pretty happy with some of his decisions, right? And so maybe they're looking, hey, maybe we should have been so hard on the guy, right? But they essentially wanted to destroy his life, not because he's a horrible person, but because of somebody else, right? They hated Trump so much they didn't care who they destroyed. And they decided they wanted to destroy his life and his family's life and anybody associated with him's life. Same with Flynn. They destroyed him. They destroyed his family. He's broke. He was going to go to prison. He may still go to prison if something doesn't happen. And there's a lot that can happen. So I simply, and I'm so sorry I can't see more comments. I'm only seeing comments from Twitter, unfortunately. Biden 6 years of corruption. How about Biden? Not sure what that means. Biden corn pop 2020. Oh, I don't know. See how things are. It's just everybody's so angry. So I hope I made my point. The point is that we need to be concerned, and we should not accept it, no matter who we are. And I'm really surprised that those on the left, the Democrats, the liberals, are accepting the things that the press are doing. The press is controlling so much of what is happening in this world right now because they simply hate the president of the United States, and they will. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what happens to innocent people. It doesn't matter what happens to our economy. It doesn't matter what happens in regard to this pandemic. And I was going to do my very best not to bring a show on any one of the live platforms that was nothing more than entertaining and informative. But this simply, I had to get off my chest and and just kind of give you a point of view that you may or may not agree with. But the point is, you got to start with a crime. All right. Simply put, FBI, police, state police, sheriff's department, we always start with a crime. You don't start with a person that you hate and then invent a crime and continue to try to get them to do something illegal. The one thing they try to get, this Logan Act hasn't been prosecuted since the 1700s. And so you're going to try to get him to do something in regard to this Logan Act, and you're going to try to get him to lie to the FBI just so you could arrest him because you hate him. You can, at some point, you are going to be successful with anybody. Like I bring up the bank thing. You may think that bank story that I brought up is far-fetched, but that's really all it takes. Is something like that. If somebody hates you in a position of power, that they can do whatever they want to get you to commit a crime or admit to a crime or put so much pressure on you and say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to make your children's life miserable. And you then have to admit to a crime. That is not acceptable. And we all must be worried. All right. So I hope I didn't go on too long, and I hope that it all made sense, and that I cannot wait to see the comments. I know there has to be, because there's 24 emotions, but I'm so sad that I can't see them. So I hope this is okay for you guys. I'm going to go ahead and spend the rest of the day with the kids and probably come on and do a Facebook Live that's a little bit more entertaining a little bit later on. All right. That's it for me. I'll talk to you later. Take care. Bye.